We are live on Yonkers Voice. Today I have City Council President Mr. Mike Khader and Yonkers PBA President Mr. Kit Olsen, Detective Kit Olsen. We are going to be speaking about the current situation affecting our country, affecting our city. We heard the demands loud and clear. We want to know what is our city doing to adapt to the current demands. Now, what we see in our country is nothing new. This is not about George Floyd. This is about the system. And we want to see what is our system doing to change the things that the people wants changed. So, Mike, please, do an opening statement followed by Mr. Kit Olsen. Take over, please.
Hello, Ben. Thank you for having us. Keith, it's good to see you. Ben, you alluded to it. What happened, maybe 2 weeks ago, the murder of George Floyd was horrific. What's going around, not only around the country, but around the world, our protests, there's frustration. And as elected leaders, we have to, before we take action to what people want to see, we have to have dialogue. We have to have conversation. We have to talk about pros and cons. And those conversations have to have, key people to talk about reform. And, you made reference, I was a city council president. I lead the city council. We're the legislative arm of the city of Yonkers. And you're going to hear from Keith Olsen, the president of the PBA. I think that his input is vital, an important part of the conversation. We have the executive, Mayor Spano. He also, in his administration, is an important part of the conversation. Ben, what we're seeing a lot is a lot of emotion. We're seeing a lot of anger. And a lot of that is justified. A lot of that is legitimate. But what we have to be careful about is we can't become reactionary legislators. We can't become reactionary leaders. We have to truly look into the reform and the policy, the law of unintended consequences. And I remember, the bail reform, for an example, which is something that in concept I supported. And because I generally feel that there was a rush on certain bail reform, they have to step back a little bit and make some amendments. So what the goal here is, and I think I've spoken about a civilian complaint review board, I've spoken about body cameras. I think that those are two factors that are within the sound realm, sound discretion, and within the authority of the city council. The goal is to implement these policies, and you want the key stakeholders to be part of that conversation.
Well, you and Mr. Olsen are key players. So we have you two here. There is other people in the city that are also part of that equation to change things. But we are starting. But the thing is, this is nothing new. What we see in United States, it's nothing that we haven't heard before. The I can breathe, I can breathe, I can breathe. It's been going on for a while.
Ben, you are right about that. The I can't breathe. Actually, just this morning, I was watching the news, having my cup of coffee, and there was a story about something that happened last year. I think it was March of 2019. And the I can't breathe, it's saying, but it's also a symbolic gesture.
Correct.
About the, it's literally, I can't breathe is a symbol. It's become a symbol of what's going on. And before we begin with the conversation,
let's allow the council. I'm sorry, the PBA president to make an opening statement as well.
Sure.
Sorry, guys. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having us, and City Council President, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate this time to chat. And I think that's exactly what we need to do. We need to have a lot of just a lot of talking, and more importantly, especially for people in positions of leadership, a lot of listening. And I think that's really probably the most important thing for us to do. We need to listen to the people who are upset and listen to what they have to hear. And we may not initially agree with a lot of or some of the things that are being said, but that's the point of listening, and to really digest what people are saying in a time like this. But I just want to say too that I also, when I watched the video of what happened to George Floyd, I was horrified, just as every other cop I've spoken to has felt the same way. We are disgusted by it. We just feel there's no place in society for anything like that, and we mourn with the city of Minneapolis. And I think that's important for people to know, that police officers feel the same way. But again, I think to echo Mike's, the city council president's statement, I agree. Now's the time to really listen to each other and to meet with each other and to talk to each other. But we do have to be very careful and not legislating from emotion, and not having reactionary legislation. I think there's a lot of items that are going to be on the table that we really need to hash out and talk about, and really fully discuss before we implement them.
Well, Keith, these emotions that you talk about, that we shouldn't make changes based on emotions. We should go there with cool heads, understand the problem. But the emotions are there. What we saw in Minneapolis the other day wasn't the first time we saw it. So how many people have to die, before things are done or made? You, as a president of a police union, how would you react if that happened in a city where you represent the police department? Would your position be the same? Was a union representative, you would be defending those involved in it? Because that would be a hard place to be, no?
Well, without a doubt, and I'm very thankful that I am not in that position, and I'm even more thankful that I've never been in that position. But I think that's not by accident, and that's what those of us in Yonkers have to remember. Whether you're a Yonkers police officer, the Yonkers union president, or the Yonkers City Council president, Minneapolis is not Yonkers, and Yonkers is not Minneapolis, and we are and have been in a better place than most police departments, and it's proven. It's proven that we are one of the safest cities of our size, and it's also proven that we have a better connection with the public, and that we've done things to make that better. Things that have been implemented in our department that other departments, police departments, are now seeking to do. We are kind of the model, and it shows, and it's statistically proven, and it's just proven, I think, in our overall relationship with the public, which was on great display over the last couple of weeks with all the protests that we've had, which were just completely peaceful, or for the most part peaceful. In 4 major rallies, we had no arrests and we had no property damage, and I think that's a huge indication of where Yonkers is at. And I think that we have to remember that we are Yonkers. We should not be legislating from the viewpoint of Minneapolis. We should remember that Yonkers is where it's at, and move on from there.
Well, Keith, on one of the protests, I saw that some of Yonkers police officers were very reluctant to go on a knee. What was the meaning? Why didn't they refuse to go on a knee? Was that a support for the police officers? Was that a support for we need change? Why not take a knee? Why not kneel in? Your commissioner did. Why did your members refuse to do it?
Well, I think it's dangerous to simplify these things.
Okay.
You can take a knee, but just to speak on that, I think every officer has their own viewpoint and their own opinion. I mean, some people are religious people and feel that they only kneel before God. I've heard that spoken. From my viewpoint, I had 2. If you remember, there was a kneeling point at the first leg, and I did not kneel, and I'll tell you why I didn't. And that's because I thought the message was not clear. I thought it was somewhat mixed. There were plenty of things that I didn't agree with. So, we didn't really know. I didn't know what people were kneeling to, and thus far at that point, the message wasn't clear that what we were asking people to take a knee for. And then at the third leg up at 104 South Broadway, when to his credit, Hector Santiago said, "We're asking you to take a kneel in solidarity for what happened to George Floyd," I was honored to do so, and I did, and I'm proud that I did.
How you think about that, Mike? Did you take a knee?
Yes, I did. I believe that first march, I actually saw Keith towards the end at the daylight of the Vanderdark Park, and the request was to take a knee, and I had no reservation, and I even posted it. When I took that knee, I took it, in memory of George Floyd and my nephew, Jonathan Maldonado. But Keith mentions a good point. When you take a knee, that symbolic gesture, in recognition of what? The murder of George Floyd, or, a list of demands or such. Doing these symbolic gestures are very important, and I even said I've had conversations with the police commissioner and even the mayor, and echoing pretty much what Keith said, Yonkers should be the model on how law enforcement deals when it comes to protesting. Think about it, Ben, and I think you were covering it. In the first march, you had the mayor who leads the city. You had the superintendent who leads the Board of Education. As the council president, who leads the city council. We were walking literally side by side in unison. Then a couple of days later, as Keith mentioned, the protesters went up in front of the precinct right on South Broadway. And Keith, I saw that, and with Commissioner Mueller, and there was exchange of words. So it's important that people recognize, the police department is not the enemy. And Ben, this is a tough time to be a cop anywhere in the country. And this past Saturday, there was a prayer march. It started right in downtown, right by the post office. We went up to Phillips Manor Hall, through Getty Square, around Chicken Island. So it wasn't a long march. And we had law enforcement, blocking intersections, making sure that there was no traffic jams. And I had my mask on. And I went to each sector car. I'm not sure if they all recognized me. I know some did. Most of them didn't. With my mask on, I said, I know it's a tough time to be in law enforcement now, but keep up the great work. Law enforcement shouldn't be penalized for some bad actors. Let's be clear about that. Cops should not be punished. All cops should not be punished. Let me rephrase that. All cops should not be punished for few. And I always use the term, imitation is the best form of flattery. Just last week, President Obama was on and he gave a little presentation. And there's this narrative being taken place, and that I feel it's either you're here or here. Either you're with law enforcement or you're with the protesters. I don't buy that. I think you could be with both. You could be with the protesters, voice your frustrations, express and acknowledge the systemic racism, but also you could be supportive of the great Yonkers cops that we have. So this whole narrative of one or the other is nonsense. We could be with both. And that's what I want to talk about. I'm willing to hope that we can find common ground, the president of the PBA. And I think that there is. I think there's going to be underlying differences, which is expected. But you know what? Let's focus on where we can find that common ground and move on that.
Keith, your view on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that we have a lot more in common than we have apart. And we definitely, have to remember that there is that common ground, and then work on the things that are not common. And that's what these discussions should be about. That's what the listening is for. Yeah, I mean, I think that's accurate and it's important.
Thank you, Keith.
Now, in Yonkers, I remember, Mike, during your campaign, You promised more police. Now, have you asked the police department if they need more police? I saw the comment, the posting by Kit Olsen the other day, and that comment confused a few people. We are not sure. Did the police ask that they need more police officers on the street, or did they say we don't have a problem, we have enough? Because that's a big difference between say yes, we need police officers, and another thing is saying more police officers could be helpful. You know, it's like a few dollars. I could have a few more dollars, but maybe what I have is enough. But if I have a few more, it would help. So have you asked Keith for more police officers, or why do you feel that the council president didn't fulfill his promise of putting more police officers on the street, or put money in the budget for you to hire more police officers?
So I've been begging for more cops for as long as I can remember. Literally, I've been involved with the Yonkers PBA. I've been with the Yonkers Police for 31 years, and I've been involved with the PBA for about 28 of those years. So from day one, I've been a proponent of that. In roughly 2014, 2015, we lost 31 police officers. They were taken out of the budget long before Mike was city council president. Absolutely no fault of his. But we've never replaced those, and we needed more before that. When you look at a police department like Rochester, who the city is roughly the same size of ours, and they have well over 800 police officers, and we have barely 600. It's a problem. It's a big problem. So, my point of that was, and I pointed all along. I've made this point several times. In terms of things like body cameras and other issues that cost money, whether it's training or what have you. I think the most important thing that we need, the priority has to be more police officers first. Once we address that, then I would say, yeah, these other, kind of nice to haves, we refer to them as, things like body cameras that may be helpful. We need cops, and we're feeling it everywhere. We need more cops on the street. We have very little community patrols. Like, we need cops on the beat, to not only fight crime, but to establish a better relationship with our department. Mike should be a proponent of this. We complain about the overtime all the time. The way to reduce overtime, or one of the ways to reduce overtime, is to add more police officers. You'll get a return on whatever you pay for police officers. You'll get a return in less payment of overtime money. When it comes to community affairs and really dealing with the public, we need more police officers there as well. We need more police officers in every aspect of what we do. And for me, and for a lot of people, and I think most of the people in Yonkers would agree with this, that should be the priority.
Now, Keith, I spoke with you probably about 3 years ago in regards to the body cameras. And you told me there is much more to it than people realize. It's not just having a camera stuck in your pocket. That's not it. That's not the expense. There is storage expenses. There is training expenses. Now, I have a comment here, an email from Hector Santiago. He has 3 questions, so I'm going to pose all 3 questions, and you can answer them in whatever order you like. He said, you seem to be opposed to body cameras because of funds. However, Yonkers has the most expensive radios and surveillance equipment in entire country. That's one question. So the budget over time was in the millions. Body cameras are in the thousands. How do we balance that out? What are you doing, you kids, to change the culture within the police department to integrate the community? In addition to those, I just see a comment here on our live stream that's saying that Yonkers has not been a Minneapolis by luck. And if we don't take care of things, we will soon see it, because we do see racial tension here in Yonkers. You accepting or not, we see it. we actually broadcasted a brawl in a supermarket when the N word was being used left and right, get the N out of here and out of that. What was done? Police was called. They had multiple instances of racial slurs in that particular store. So it's just a matter. Hopefully, I'm wrong, okay? But we should take a proactive instead of reactive. Go ahead.
And we have. So whoever said that we are not Minneapolis by accident is absolutely not true. It's just not. And the things that we've done, we had the DOJ come into Yonkers and do an investigation. And they did a 7 or 8 year investigation, and they showed that there was no systemic racism, in the Yonkers policing. But also, as a result of that investigation, the DOJ gave us an outline of things that they thought we should do. They gave us a technical assistance letter with several things that they thought we should implement, and we did them. So these things that we implemented have had a huge effect. We have an early warning system where if police officers are on the wrong track and they have instances where they are making mistakes or doing something really bad, we know early on. So when you hear like the officer in Minneapolis, Derek Chauvin, had 18 or 19 complaints and nothing was done, it doesn't happen in Yonkers. We know immediately when, or we know very, very early on if there's a problematic officer. When we talk about the most recent complaints where the young lady Shakima was arrested on Carroll Avenue, it's really important to look at that. We didn't start investigating that because it wound up on Facebook. We didn't even start investigating that because Shakima made a complaint. Within 2 hours of the incident, because of the things we've implemented, we had internal affairs at the scene proactively investigating that long before anybody had made a complaint. So to say that, and those are just a couple of the things that we've implemented. So to say that what happened in Minneapolis is, that we're not Minneapolis because of an accident, and that we've been lucky, that's just absolutely not true. We've worked really, really hard to be where we are.
Now, Kit, I do remember an incident that happened on School Street a few years ago that ended in a fatality of the suspect jumping from second or third floor. I'm not sure about the floor. I was there on the scene. Because of that incident, there was an investigation launched, and 2 police officers were convicted. They were convicted of wrongdoing in relationship to getting a warrant in an improper way. You were at the footsteps of the courthouse supporting those officers that were just convicted. So when you get a conviction, what does that make you? Now, when you go and support them, what statement are you giving to the community?
Well, people forget this, that first and foremost, police officers are humans and they're citizens of the New York State and the country, just like everybody else. They have the right to due process, and that's what happened there. The police officers were investigated, they were arrested, and ultimately they pled guilty. And we're okay with that. There were no riots afterwards. There was no protests. There was no union slowdown. We have moved on from that. They got their due process, but as they are entitled to, and we've moved on.
But Kit, maybe you moved on. I'm not sure if the community moved on. Okay, and we are not talking about the due process. We all believe that we have the due process. What I'm asking you is your support for those 2 police officers that were convicted.
I support their right to due process. Do you not believe that they have the right to due process, Ben?
Like I just said, we all believe in due process.
Right.
Okay, but when you go there and you stand on the steps of the courthouse and support, what you say, the statement that you're making might not be what the people in Yonkers are hearing it. Because look, police officers commit a crime. How long does it take for an investigation to take place. If a civilian commits a crime, maybe in half an hour or an hour, an arrest will be made. That's the problem. The community are seeing that there is two sets of judicial systems. There is two sets of enforcement, one for the general public and one for police officers. And that's what the people are demanding, that change. And I understand your position. You are a union representative. They are your members, and you have to defend them. But looking at the big picture, the people are not happy with the way things are. We feel that we should have one system, one judicial process, and every man under the flag of United States should be subject to that law and that procedure. Why is it different for your members? When I say your members, I'm talking about police officers, not Yonkers PD.
Right. I don't think it is. I disagree with you. There is one process for everybody. That's our criminal justice system is complex. It is far from perfect, but it works pretty well. I mean, these police officers were, prior to this, they had never been arrested before. Obviously, they were police officers with very clean records and really good histories. They had received, between the two of them, several awards. And what they did was wrong, and what they did was illegal. They went through the process. They were arrested. Ultimately, they pled guilty, and they were punished. And I'll tell you this: they both went to jail, not for a long time, but as police officers, and you can talk to any police officer, will tell you that more often than not, people on their first arrest never go to jail. So I could easily say that in this case, they were treated harsher than other people. And people might not believe that, but that's fairly accurate. There is no sympathy for criminal police officers in the criminal justice system. There just isn't. I think that's I just disagree with what you're
okay. Well, I'm just giving for both sides and see what you have to say. Maybe you clarify certain points for people that are watching. Now, you just mentioned the federal, the DOJ investigation into the Yonkers Police Department. There was a federal consent decree. Has the Yonkers Police Department fulfilled that agreement on its totality?
I believe they have. I'm not aware of anything that they have not fulfilled. As far as I know, they have.
Mike, you want to interject here?
Thank you, Ben. That consent decree was entered into before I took counsel, and I believe it was close to maybe 100 requirements. Most of them we are in compliance, and I specifically asked that question to the police commissioner this past budget season, a couple of weeks ago. It's the intent of the police department that the last couple of requirements by the end of the year. So the short answer is we're not in full compliance. We're trending in that right direction. Hopefully by the end of the year, all the requirements would be met. Ben, if I may, Keith has mentioned a lot of stuff that I think it's important to comment on. One, the more cops. That statement came back in 2017. We're not, it always feels that it's an election year. We're not in an election year. But I came out, when I was running for office. I've always maintained we need more cops, particularly foot patrols. I've said that publicly. And this is my third, we just finished our third budget season. Two of them were with Commissioner Muller's predecessor, Commissioner Gardner. I asked that question twice. I asked the question this time, less than a month ago, do we need more cops? And, and the script looks like, no, we don't need more cops. Particularly, so take that back, where the commissioner who heads the department, mind you, they serve at the absolute discretion and the pleasure of the mayor. If they're not requesting more patrol, and let's be clear, patrol officers would be in Keith Olsen's union. I've always, and despite where Keith and I may be on this issue or previous issues or going forward, I've always requested that, even the way overtime is being given out. So now, put yourself in my position. If I'm publicly saying we need more patrol, be it Lake Avenue, McLean Avenue, Post, Elliott, we need something in downtown. And if it's not being requested, then here's how the budget process works. Take a timeout. Each department, each commissioner is in charge of their department, and they prepare their proposed budget. It then goes to the mayor's office and finance, and they either accept it or they modify it. We get to see what they wanted and what was approved. You understand? It's not being requested. Keith, I agree with you, and I've used the term repurpose money. We're at about $17 million in overtime, give or take, in that ballpark. I would love to see some of that money, and we have something called the overtime line in the 100 section. Keith, you know what I'm referring to clearly. I would love to see some of that 17 million go up to the salary line where you create new positions, having fixed costs. Overtime is a management issue. And when you're going on overtime and you're going over the allotted time, there's a manpower issue. There's a staffing issue. And it's not just with the YPD. It's also with the Yonkers Fire Department. When there's backfilling positions and vacation pays and sick time, you need more staffing. But Keith, I will stand side by side with you, shoulder to shoulder with you. As somebody who didn't receive PBA endorsement, we need more patrol. And you've heard me say that. You've heard me question that while you were in the chambers. The only thing I ask of you, the elected officials that you supported, get them on board. You have my unconditional support. We need more foot patrols. McLean, Lake, downtown, Elliott, Hamilton. You're hearing it. You record everything. But now the members, the council members that you've supported, get them on board.
So,
and I'll be there. I'll be with you, side by side, when you say that.
So we have an understanding here that the council president and the president of the Yonkers PBA are both in agreement that we need more police officers on the street of Yonkers.
Yeah,
and particularly foot patrols.
Foot patrol.
I would like, foot patrols. And this is not something where I've evolved from. I think I've been pretty consistent with this position. Keith, I'm looking at you. You have my unconditional support. Your other elected officials you've supported, get them on board. If there's something that I could do to get them on board, let me know. Let's work on it shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand.
Now, Keith, we've been hearing demands such as defund the police, dismantle the police. We have a city in New Jersey called Camden, which in 2012, the police department was dismantled. This is a city that crime was going wild. And since that dismantlement, the crime went down to close to 50%. Is this a model that would work in a city of our size, or no? And also explain, what do you understand by defund the police? Because lots of people are not understanding what that means. Okay, can you explain and talk about the model that Camden, New Jersey is going through?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two different things that people get confused. There's defund, which I believe people mean that they will take some funding away from police and put it towards other programs. And then there's the dismantle the police, which is basically what happened in Camden, and it's what they're talking about now in Minneapolis. I think the city council has a veto-proof vote to dismantle the police. Honestly, I can't imagine how that's going to work. I know that they did something like that in Camden, but what I will say is this. Camden, New Jersey was the most crime-ridden town in the country, or city in the country. It was an absolute disaster. And clearly the police department was broken. It was absolutely broken. So they had nowhere to go but up. Whatever they were doing was clearly wrong, and nothing like we do here in Yonkers, which is why, Camden being one of the most dangerous cities of its size for years. I mean, it really was like that for a long time. Is nothing like Yonkers, and Yonkers is the exact opposite. What we've done here is extraordinary, and it's worked, and it's proven, in just a lot of different ways. Listen, we're by no means perfect. We have a lot of room to improve in a lot of different areas, but clearly what we've done so far is working pretty well, and we're in no shape, way, or form like Camden.
Now, Keith, I have spoken with Commissioner Mueller a few times in regards to the Yonkers Police Department. He accepts and he says exactly what you just said. We don't have a perfect police department, and personally, I don't even think that it's possible. He says that there is room for improvement. If you had to make an assessment, where would be the greatest fields within the police department that you think most of this improvement is necessary, and what would that be?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't want to just, hang on to the fact that we need more police officers to get things done. I mean, I think that is at the root of a lot of our problems. But aside from that, aside from staffing issues, and I'm going to echo what the commissioner said the other day in front of 104 South Broadway at the protest. I think on the day-to-day interactions we have with people, we could probably do a better job. And I'm not at all pointing a finger at the new cops. What I do is, and I just had a conversation with one of my good friends on the job right before this meeting happened. I dissect my own career. I've been on the job for 31 years, and I looked at how I policed throughout my life as a 31 year veteran, and I look back on things that I did maybe when I got hired when I was 20. So when I was 20 to 25, and then 25 to 30. And then there's been several versions of police officer that in my career. We all evolve as human beings, and you evolve as a police officer. And I look back, and if I were to critique my own career, I would say one of the things I probably could have done a better job of was in my daily interactions with people. Even when we stop people for suspected crimes, maybe after the fact explaining to them why we were doing it, what we were doing it for. But I would say, if there's something we could work on, and I think we could work on this through implicit bias training and things of that nature, I think there's room for improvement there.
Now, Keith, in a relationship, husband and wife, very often what the husband says and what the wife hears are two different things, or vice versa. Okay. Now. Now, I heard the police commissioner speak, as I said numerous times, including the other day in front of the police headquarters. But my question is, what he says and what the police officers on the street hearing, is it the same thing? Because we hear these words and we hear your words, but when you deal with the police officers on the street, it's like there is a block. They're not hearing it. They act differently. They react differently. And sometimes they actually disrespect the people. And because of that, things escalate. It seems like the de-escalation process within the police department, it's not up to par to what you and the commissioner like. And it's because of those issues that sometimes you create the wrong perspective or the wrong way that the people of Yonkers or any community sees the police department. Should a little training on that be taking place? Do we need an escalation? Do we need a big problem? Do we need somebody to die in order to say, okay? Other things that have been said by you and the commissioner, just the things that the people want to hear, or do you really mean it?
No, I mean it 100%. And I said it from the beginning, there is room for improvement there. If there weren't room for improvement, that means our cops are being perfect. And we know that's not possible. So yeah, I mean, I think that is something that we should work on. I say that to my members. My members are listening now. They're hearing what I'm saying. I would say a lot of them are tuning in. They're hearing. But we clearly mean it, because if you look at the history of the Yonkers Police Department and where we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 31 years ago, we are miles and miles away from that.
No doubt.
You look at our statistics with internal affairs and the amount of complaints that are filed. We had 6 excessive force complaints last year. 6. That is that's very close to 0, which is an unachievable number. But the numbers don't lie, I think. And yes, are there people out there who experience things that don't make a complaint? For sure there are. But if you look at where we were years ago as to where we are today, I think it's a clear indication that people are listening, and what we're doing is working, and we're trending in the right direction.
Well, Keith, I saw it on social media news in regards to what's going on in the country, and one of those slogans is, "Can you hear us now? Can you hear us now?" Perhaps we need to put a slogan in Yonkers Police Department, in regards to your officers, asking them, "Can you hear us now?" Meaning, can they hear you and can they hear the commissioner? Because the way they act, of course, I'm not saying all. Okay, most police officers are exemplary people. I deal with them on a daily basis, but some, and that small percentage sometimes leaves a bad taste in the community. So let's police our streets, but let's show the community that they can hear you and they can hear the commission. Police with respect. Mike, you want to say anything on this?
Yeah, thank you, Ben, for allowing me. One, we are not Minneapolis. We are not Camden. And we should always worry about Yonkers and the dynamics within Yonkers. This whole defund police department and dismantle the police department, I did a little research about it. And to be quite, the first time that any elected came out was actually the city council president in Minneapolis. And it was my counterpart in Minneapolis, and it was on CNN. And it was like a straightforward question. What do you mean by that? And the answer wasn't clear. And this is something that you take a position on. The city of Yonkers needs a Yonkers Police Department. They need to be adequately staffed, adequately equipped, adequately trained. Now, anything about this dismantling and defunding, I won't support it. I won't entertain conversations about that. What we should be talking about, which I think was what the concept was you made reference to Camden about the policing. What we need to make sure is that the resources are in place, implicit bias training, making sure name tags are being shown. All these little things are productive conversations. Right now, cops are under fire. Good cops are under fire. Great cops are under fire, and that's unfortunate. However, how do we restore? And I know some people took exception. What do you mean restore faith? There's faith. Unfortunately, there is. There's a lot of people that have faith in the police department. I do. I deal with them as a resident. I deal with them as a resident. I deal with them as a parent. I deal with them as a city council president. But also, we have to look at, there's a large population in our city that has negative favorability. And in that population, it can't be ignored. Unfortunately, perception is reality sometimes. Facts don't matter sometimes, unfortunately. It's a perception, and we have to work on that perception. I don't want to talk about a pending internal affairs investigation, but, Keith Olsen has made reference to the incident, and we all saw the photograph. It was an African-American female, handcuffed, bloody nose, and right behind it was the radio car, Yonkers Police Department. That was horrific. that was a picture. I asked a question, right? And again, I don't want to get into the details of it because it's pending and you don't want to taint that investigation. But if that police officer had a body camera on, and while they were looking for her, they would have seen what was happening. They would have seen what was going on in interaction. Because here's what's the issue with the picture. It's a snapshot of that moment. It doesn't give you the full picture. It doesn't give you that atmospherics. It doesn't tell you what happened beforehand. So that example, yes, internal affairs was there within hours, not days, within hours. So the system is working. However, that's an example I generally feel if body cameras were there, we have a whole different view on it. So going back about the community policing, I mean, listen, we have, and you mentioned his name, Hector Santiago. We have the Stop and Shake initiative. We have the Coffee and Cop initiative, Coffee and Pizza initiative. We have National Night Out initiative. We have all these great community-based, but at the end of the day, we have to look at the returns. There is a clear disconnect with a lot of our minority community and the police department. So what we have to do as leaders, as the leader of the PBA, as the leader of the city council, let's have these difficult conversations. Let's talk about this systemic racism. What I look at is I'm a data-driven person. When you look at where a lot of calls for service are, and call for service is the fancy word, where are cops being dispatched to? Where are a lot of the, plain and simple, we need a car out here. And they call it sectors. Sectors is a fancy word for an area of Yonkers. And Keith, please correct, I believe it was Sector 401 and Sector 303 are the highest call volume areas. Am I correct on those two?
Correct.
Okay, so when you look at that area, it's also the area of the highest COVID cases. It's the area where they're marginalized. It's the area where there's no economic development. Or if there is economic development, residents can't even afford to rent that. So the George Floyd murder it's the one, and like I said, it's the straw that broke the camel's back. So there is a lot of issues. So yeah, Keith, you're absolutely, and thank God we're not Minneapolis. Thank God we're not Camden. God bless the city of Yonkers. But the formula for unrest is here.
Okay.
You have let me just finish. Disenfranchisement. You have apathy. You have large unemployment and a minority community that feels ignored.
Okay. So
that's the conversation we should be having.
As you both know, we are live and there is questions coming in. So let me just put this in there so people who are watching us understand that the questions that I'm making is not because to satisfy my own personal curiosity.
But I'm standing up, my back hurts, so don't,
Yeah. So the questions are questions posed. I'm asking questions that the people of Yonkers wants to know. Now, Keith, this is from Hector Santiago as well. I'm going to pose two questions, one from Hector Santiago and another from Gail Baxter. Hector says, well, we have Stop and Shake, was created years ago to help forge a better relationship between those who serve us, meaning the police department, and those that are being served, meaning the community. But this tool was never used. Was it used or it wasn't used? And if it was used, to what extent? The other question is from Gail Baxter. I'm not sure if she's correct. You can correct us if she's not. I understand that officers can move their residency requirements outside Yonkers after 5 years of service. I don't know if that is correct. And the third question that I'm going to pose, and you both can take turns, is it time to have a person of color at the highest position within the police department? Because I hear we don't have it. We don't have enough sergeants that are minorities. We don't have enough lieutenants, and we don't have enough captains. Now, is it because of race? Personally, I don't think so. But perception sometimes becomes reality. And I know that the police department, they had and fire department not long ago, they were asking for minorities to apply, but there is requirements. People cannot be just hired because you're black or you're yellow or you this or you that. You have to meet the requirements. Can you talk about those 3 points, Keith?
Yeah, and don't forget, Hector had other questions earlier, and you should be mad at both of us that we haven't answered any.
Oh, please, then, if you saw the questions, take this time.
So, and one's tied into the other. So the last question about the stop and shake, and you said it's never been used. That's just not accurate. We use it, and we use it fairly often. Kudos to Hector for creating this. I remember when he did it, I thought it was just astounding that a kid from the community, thought this out, and really kudos to him for fighting to continue to make it happen. And I know that he's done that. I have had many discussions with Hector about it, and I know he's been frustrated with the police department that it hasn't happened as often as he would like. But I would tell him to hang in there and continue. We have utilized it. I think we could utilize it more. Hector's right about that. But to say that we've never used it is just not accurate. And one of the things, and this ties into Hector's original question about one of his original questions, what are we doing to bridge that gap with the community? And that's the thing I think Hector forgets, that we have a lot of other programs that take up our time. And there's only X amount of hours in a day. And I think it should be a priority, and I think it has been. But, when you talk about all the programs that City Council President mentioned, but in addition to that, even just things that the union has started, which is a bit unusual. I think we're trying to set the tone, and we're trying to be the role model. But right from the union, our relationship with the kids from the Yonkers Force, the fact that we are at their practices and that we feed them dinner before games, we literally serve them dinner before games. We meet with them in off season. I just had a Zoom meeting with some of the kids the other day, and then we go to their games and support them both financially and physically. And most of all, we just meet each other and see each other. That's a huge program. We have a similar program that Captain Pat McCormick runs with hockey, which was started by the NHL, I believe. It's a really brilliant idea, but it's just another way to get kids from the community and have them with police officers to talk, for both to listen to each other. And just those are just 2 examples of things we do. The PBA, I started a program called the BRIC program several years ago. And BRIC stands for Building Relationships Through Interactions with Cops and Kids. And what we do is we go into the schools, we ask the schools, here's all we're asking for. Bring the kids in a comfortable setting, usually like a round table type of setting. It's usually in a library or somewhere peaceful and quiet. And we ask the kids to be prepared to have a unadulterated, unfiltered conversation about policing. And we say right off the bat, we want to get into Black Lives Matter. We want to get into police brutality, all of it. Nothing, no holds barred. You guys shoot questions at us, comments, concerns, and we bring in a few cops and we have those conversations. And it's really, to me, one of the most fulfilling things that we do. So we have a ton of things that are going on here that have been helping to build this bridge with the community, and we're going to continue to do those. And there's always more. I'm a firm believer in, pretty much in everything that we do, we can do better, and we're going to try to do that.
Keith, we have a statement here from Shanae Williams, Councilwoman. Keith said he would support implicit bias training. Please, if you will support undue racism training. Well, because they are very different and very necessary.
Undue racism training, was that the term?
That's the term. I'm reading word by word. Yes.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that. I am familiar with implicit bias training, and obviously, I'm open to any kind of training, Ben. But but what Ms. Williams has to remember, especially as a councilwoman, is all of these things cost money, and she has to come up with, and the city council president has to come up with the money to implement these programs. And in terms of thinking like that, and here's where my concerns come in. When you have a department who really their number one problem may be that we don't have enough cops. You do, whether you like it or not, you have to start to prioritize. So yeah, I mean, we all want these things. That's that's pie in the sky. There's 100 pieces of training I'd like to have, but there's not enough time and there's not enough money. So we have to really prioritize. My question to Miss Shanae Williams would be, what's your priority?
Yeah.
Is it wouldn't you prefer to have a cop on your street on the beat, or is it X, Y, or Z? And those are the decisions that we have to make.
Kit, I always tell people that with all the wants, there is an invoice attached to it. Okay, we want this, we want that, but there is an invoice. And you forgot a few things that police officers do, like read a book with the police cop at the library.
I didn't forget them, Ben. There's not enough time to talk about them. I'm one of the people that reads to the kids.
Yeah. Oh, okay. But definitely, we need those things to be known. The community needs to know. I guess the police department needs to find a way to publicize those things so the community can see what is the police department doing. We don't want to see just police officers when they come for an arrest. And that's why when firemen comes, they all love them. And when police officers come, they don't, because they know they come for different reasons. So right. We need to bank on the things that the police does for the community, my opinion.
And I couldn't agree more. And here's one of the things too. And this is a promise, and it is a request, and it's a statement all at once. What I really like to see is a complete revamping, a reinvigoration, actually, of the Yonkers Police Athletic League, the Yonkers PAL, and we're going to need help with that. It's kind of fallen off the tracks over the last few years. They still do a lot of great work. I'm not downgrading what they've done. They're great people attached to it, people with big hearts, and a lot of them with huge donations that we would need, but. What I would love to see, and I promise to be a part of this, is to completely revamp and rebuild the Yonkers PAL with the main goal of connecting with inner city kids, giving them something to do to occupy themselves and to have fun, and to really bridge that gap between the police and the community.
Now, this statement comes from Damon Jones. I'm going to, two statements that came out, one in the form of an email and now in the form of a comment. And either one of you can address it. The first comment is, there is no price tag to addressing racial bias. You will never either pay in the end with a civil lawsuit. Means if you don't do it, it will cost you much more than if you invested right. Now, the other statement is to you, Keith, and I understand this question is to you because you are the union president. If one of your officers, members, is found to violate department policies that leads to serious injuries or death, should he or she be charged with the crime? You answered that before in another form, but this is a direct question to you from Mr. Damien Jones.
So, my attorney says it all the time. We're not the mob. We don't protect criminals. We are the police department and we are a police union. What I will say is everybody, whether it's police officers or anybody else, is entitled to due process. So they're entitled to a true and a fair and a just investigation. But at the end of the day, if that officer is found guilty of any kind of misconduct, whether it's police brutality or anything else, then that's that. They will serve whatever punishment they get, whether it's discipline within our job, whether it's as far as termination, and if it's worse in a court of law, if they're punished in a court of law, then so be it. I mean, that's the way it is, and we live with that. We accept that.
Mike?
Yes. This is to follow up, going back again to what my colleague Shanae and Damon says. You can't put a price tag. The police department, is, I call it one of the big three when it comes to police, fire, and DPW are the three biggest departments in our city. And actually, the DPW deals with people, but you don't necessarily deal with them. Most people are sleeping or working when they plow the streets and pick up the garbage. If somebody doesn't call 911 for a fire or a health emergency, you don't deal with the fire department. But everyone at some shape, way, or form sees a police patrol officer. You can't put a price tag on restoring faith. Don't forget, we have fees and personal injury settlements, wrongful death arrest. I see it because the city council votes on it. The city council also votes on legal fees when we have to defend these type of cases. So Keith, yes, you are correct. And I'm a fiscal hawk. I think you're aware of that. I've always talked about, the way, how we spend money, where we spend money, but also you can't put a price tag on restoring faith credibility. You can't put a price tag on certain things like that. I believe if I just said off the top, police department's budget is about $100 million. We could find money for some body cams. We could find money for these very necessary, and we constantly talk about, these racism training, implicit bias training, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other stuff that we're not even aware of. Keith, as the president of the PBA, you have to take certain positions to represent your members, and the positions you take are not unique. There was a PBA president up in what happened in Rochester. The mayor criticized them for taking a hardline approach. So recognizing the hat you wear, come up with the ideas, and I will support it. There's a time to penny pinch. There's a time to reposition, but you cannot save dollars at the cost of integrity, faith, trust, and life. So training, we could bond it. I mean, Keith, let's be realistic. We bond the SUV vehicles. We bond police vehicles. We could bond these cameras. The question now is not how do we pay for it, is the will there? That's the hard part, because when you're talking about a $1.2 billion budget, which includes obviously the city municipal and the Board of Education, the $500,000, and I don't even know where that number came up from, but if that's the number for purchasing and whatever, it's minimal. I don't have $500,000 in my pocket, but when you talk about 1.2 billion, compare it to $500,000, it's de minimis, and I think that it's important.
Yeah, just to touch on that, it is not. It's the price tag that is attached to this is well over $1 million, and then Ben touched on it earlier. It's not just the body cams, which I guess you probably could bond for, but I'm not sure you can bond for the staffing that it would take to run this, which is probably in the hundreds of thousands. When you take cops off the street, Mike, that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be taking cops off the street to monitor and man this program, and the data, the price of the data storage is where the biggest chunk is at. Similar to ever.
Well, Keith, and you're right, and I don't want to get into the weeds, but for one,
you have to get into the weeds.
Okay.
You can't get into the weeds.
Okay, fair point. And what we all we'll take it there. But for example, and I believe this commissioner has ended up of having cops and administrators. Cops patrols should be patrolling. So and the storage is very important because you want to maintain the integrity of the film. You don't want to doctor it or all of a sudden things get deleted or erased. So you're absolutely correct. That's an IT issue. We have one of the best IT departments here. So you don't need a cop to restore. I just said it about 15 minutes ago on Facebook Live. We need more cops. We need more cops for foot posts, not cops protecting the video.
You're misunderstanding.
I'm sorry if I do.
It's a huge program to run. And now, especially now, with the onset of the new discovery laws, what people don't understand is that this footage, within 14 days, this footage all has to be turned over to the defense if there's an arrest. So let's just picture it's a major crime. Let's just say it's a homicide, and you literally have sometimes 20, 30 police officers at a crime scene, in and out of a crime scene, sometimes more, and some of them there for hours. Now think of that. Let's just say it's an average of 2 hours per cop and there's 30 cops. And then this is a lowballing. You're talking 60. Somebody has to review 60 hours of footage. And then they also have to make sure that gets to the DA's office so that it gets to the defense. That's just one aspect.
Agreed. Agreed. I'm glad that you went in there.
So, gentlemen, allow me to interject here. So, Keith, your issue of opposing body cameras is exclusively due to financial costs?
Almost. So, yeah, just to be really clear, I do not completely oppose body cameras. I do not completely oppose it. I recognize some of the benefits of it, and whether people realize it or not, maybe the biggest benefit is for the police officers. It clears up civilian complaints.
Correct.
My other departments that have it, they don't mind it and they kind of like it. But some of the issues I have, number one, first and foremost, is the money. I mean, and again, we're in Yonkers. We're not in Scarsdale. We're not somewhere else who has this giant tax base and is able to spend like they want to. We're cash strapped, and whether it's within the police department, I think there's just so many other things that, especially staffing, that we could spend the money on. And then throughout the city, I think you'd easily make the argument that there's things that are more important than body cameras. And let me just say this too. This notion of a pilot program to kind of test it out, it's been on a pilot program throughout the world for the last few years. And if you look at the latest studies show they really don't do anything. They don't change police behavior. They don't lessen the amount of police complaints. Like, these are real comprehensive studies done by like the Pew Research, Washington D.C. police, who have 4,000 police officers. They did a really, really in-depth study, and what we're finding is that the body cams aren't really doing anything. So when you, and this is why I think we need this discussion. People need to know this. So, they're not this magic wand that people think they are. They're just not.
So, Keith, are you telling me that all these police departments that are implementing body cams are wrong? There is not much to gain by implementing those? I think they do. At least you would keep a peace of mind in the public. We would see exactly what happened, what went down, and it would protect both sides. Because otherwise, you leave room for the lawsuits and all kind of criminal things that people might think. People, without you can clear things so much quicker.
Right.
With
in Minneapolis. Minneapolis has body cameras.
Well, but you see, that's the problem. They have body cameras, but they haven't showed what the cameras captured.
Right.
I wonder why.
Well, it clearly didn't stop the behavior that we saw on the cell phone video.
But it showed. Now imagine if we did not have those videos, and if we did not have the people around filming, maybe nothing would happen to those 4 police officers.
And that's kind of one of my points too. And the fact is that many police departments throughout the country are dropping their programs. So, and that's important to note. So yeah, it is on a pilot program throughout the world. But what we're finding is that many police departments, because of the really lack of effectiveness and combined with the cost factor, which you have to incorporate into this, they are dropping the body cam program. That's a fact. You can look that up.
Keith, do you think that in Minneapolis, if we did not have those images, you think those 4 police officers would have been charged?
That's a really tough thing to say. I mean, there was a death, so certainly it would have been investigated. I don't think any of us can answer that.
Mike, seems like you want to say something.
No, it goes back to, now, Keith, we're talking about dollars and cents. And again, Ben, Keith, you're never going to let me if I'm supporting something, we're going to make sure that it's done the right way. So Keith, when you get the body cam, that's actually the equipment, but then you need the support staff to process it, to store it, and also just to look at it. So what I'm not going to do is do, a skeleton type of program. If we do it, let's do it the right way. This is not to mention that also, and again, we as a city council, we vote on a lot of funding that comes from Homeland Security and stuff. We haven't even discussed opportunities from Department of Justice programs where they could come. Many grants do cover certain types of this. I also, Keith, and I always appreciate your knowledge in your area. I'm never a law enforcement professional. I never hold myself to be that. I appreciate the great work, but I've also looked at policy papers from John Jay College, my alma mater, George Mason University, other nonpartisan think tanks, and there is value that sometimes you can't quantify in these body cams. And that's restoring faith. And how do you put, okay, it's easy to put a price tag on a camera. It's easy to put a price on, okay, we need one civilian to monitor that. That's 80,000 plus fringe benefits. That's hard numbers. However, how do you quantify restoring faith? You know what? This is a good idea. How do you quantify where, you know, where that video camera now exonerates a police officer and says, look, yeah, that was one picture with the defendant on the ground, but you got to see 5 minutes before that. So there's, you know, it's dollar and cents, which I appreciate that, Keith, but it's bigger than dollar and cents. And so that's important.
That's such a great question. So how do you quantify restoring faith or even having faith, let's say? Because you can't really say restore faith because, you know, surveys show, and I think for the most part, citizens of Yonkers, for the most part, have faith in the Yonkers Police Department. But for those who don't, let's say that.
Agreed.
How do we gain their faith? And you're equating having body cameras with gathering and gaining their faith, and that's not accurate. You know, we know. Let me finish. We know police departments all throughout the country that have body cameras where the people of that city do not have faith. And that's because they don't accomplish what people think they're going to accomplish. So, and that's so important when you realize that, and that's proven in so many places across this country. So, and that's why you have to you have to take the cost of that. If you're going to take the cost of $1 million plus program that's not going to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, then you shouldn't do it. That's what, you know, where it's the responsibility of the legislators to acknowledge that and to recognize that.
Well, Keith, respectfully, you said earlier, we're not Minneapolis, we're not Camden, and now to support your position, you're looking at other municipalities. It can't be a moving target. Do you want to compare municipalities where it did work? We'll have that conversation. You don't want to look at, and I'm prepared for both, because again, when you take a position, be prepared to defend it. No position is perfect. Having it is not perfect. Not having it is not perfect. But you know, we pride ourselves on being Yonkers guys, right? Born here, raised here. We all know everyone in every district, literally. And I appreciate what you said. We're not Minneapolis. Don't compare us to Minneapolis. We're not Camden. Don't compare us to Camden. Great points. But now don't go to other municipalities. I'm going to say, Keith, well, listen, I'm not talking about where it didn't work. Let's talk about Yonkers. Number two is, I agree with you. There is a lot of people that appreciate the hard work of the YPD. I'm one of them. However, if there's a demand, that demand must be reasonably addressed. And again, $1 million, and again, I haven't looked at these numbers. I'm going at face value, and I assume you look at, you speak to your counterparts in other municipalities. $1 million is a drop in the bucket. And I'm talking as a fiscal hawk when it comes to spending dollars, particularly when I see what some of these dollars are spent out in studies and such. So if we want to talk about other municipalities where it doesn't work, fine. I could point out municipalities where it does work. You have policy papers, white paper where it doesn't work. I'll provide where it does work. I know if you and I take a walk in Southwest Yonkers, districts 1, 2, and 3, most people will support it.
But Mike, why don't we do that? And it should be posed to the people, but it can't be posed that in a vacuum. What we have to say is, because there are only X amount of dollars for things. So one of the questions should be, What would you prefer? If we have extra money, would you want more cops on patrol on the beat, or would you want these cameras?
I will post that survey, Keith. I will post and see what the people think. But video images are a tool of accountability. They are a tool that will help determine one way or the other. As a matter of fact, you go in Yonkers, in every single corner, there is a police video on top of us, watching where we go and watching what we do. So, but somehow when there is engagement between police and citizens, we don't see those videos that those cameras capture. But if somebody is killed in that very same corner, the police will utilize that video to make an arrest and make a charge. So images are important.
I agree. But Ben, because you're not seeing them doesn't mean that the police aren't seeing them. So when
Correct.
When Internal Affairs goes out to investigate a complaint like Shakima Alford, they go and they recover the video. The still image that we're talking about of the police officer being next to the car with her bleeding on the ground was from a video. It was from a store video. When they have use of force issues, every single use of force that we are encountered with, and by use of force I mean as little as if somebody were to pull away from being handcuffed and you had to control their arms, that's considered a use of force. That's all documented, and in all use of force cases, the supervisor, depending on what level it is, the supervisor goes out and looks for video for those things, and they find video. So, and then that's kind of my point too. For so many of these instances, there's already video. It's not like we're missing things that are going by the wayside. There's video.
But we cannot see those videos, Kit. We have to take your word for it. Okay, the video shows this, but what about letting the people see that videos so we can determine if our police department is doing what they are supposed to do? I know
there has to be some level of trust there. I mean, that's a society we live in today.
People are not trusting the police department, Kit.
That's not accurate.
No, it is. You think, Kit, you see those millions of people walking on the streets of America, and everywhere in the globe, people supporting those people are walking on the streets of America. You think that's a representation that we trust the police department? I'm not talking about the Yonkers PD. I think that we are a department that could set an example to many. We are talking in general terms.
I'm talking in Yonkers terms.
Okay, but this is a big picture, and we are in support of other police departments, and you serve a public, and the public wants body cameras on police officers. That will help your members, it will help the community. We spend millions or thousands on drones, fancy radios. You revamp the whole system. So what about investing on what the people of Yonkers wants? We want cameras. Maybe the federal government can subsidize these, but we need cameras. We need to hold our police department accountable when they do things in a way they're not supposed to do, regardless if it's YPD, Minneapolis PD, NYPD. You meaning police departments, should be held accountable, and you should be transparent to what occur or happens. Because
Ben, I agree, and I won't find anybody that does not agree. We absolutely have to be held accountable for the things that we do. I agree wholeheartedly. And just to be really, really clear again, I am not against body cameras. I am not saying that in no way, shape, or form cops should not have body cameras. I'm not saying that at all. But you have to remember, where we are financially as a city. We are a cash-strapped city that can't afford a lot of things. We're a city that doesn't have JV sports and programs for kids. There's so many things that this city doesn't have, and it's great. It's nice to be on that side where you say, let's just get it, and forget that it has to be paid for. But it has to be paid for. And my point is that I think there's a lot of things, especially within the police department and even outside of the department, that we'd be better off spending money on. That's all I'm saying. And I'm 100% for accountability.
Okay, now let me go into something else. I'm sure that people will bring up the body camera again. So let's talk about a list of demands that were made by the protesters. I don't have them all by memorized because I'm getting a little old. Sometimes I forget. But some of those demands, Kit, I believe, are already implemented.
Sure. So the implicit bias training, I think Hector and the group had a list of 4 demands. So number 1 was body cameras. Number 2 was implicit bias training. Me as a union president, back as far as 2016, I encouraged the department to adopt implicit bias training. I'm a believer in it. I want to go through it. I want to experience it myself. I had actually gone as far as reaching out to a friend who put me in touch with a police department in North Carolina, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department, who had what was considered an amazing implicit bias curriculum. And I had talked to then Commissioner Gardner about bringing that to Yonkers. It's never happened. I'm sad that that's the case, but I'm all for it. But you got to remember this too. It's going to cost money, to train police officers, whether we want to admit it or not. It costs money. We can't just ignore that. So and I know one of the other things that were on the list of demands was more. I think it was like community police workshops or more interaction with the community and the police. And not only am I all for it, we've exhibited it. We've started programs and 1,000% we're behind that.
Yeah. Now, Kit, just before, Lorraine Lopez just made a very important point, and I have to bring it up. Guys, I see people here suggesting funds from the federal government and all that. Remember, those funds are given to cities based on census. So fill up your census if you want to get grants that will help the things that you are demanding, that you are requesting. Fill it up the census. Don't just say, I want. Those wants come with certain criteria that need to be fulfilled, and census is one of them. Now, Mr. Olsen, you didn't answer the question that Gail Baxter posted. Residency. Do you think that every police officer in the city of Yonkers should be a resident of the city of Yonkers?
So to get hired within by the Yonkers Police Department, you have to be a resident. You are allowed to move out of Yonkers after 1 year. So yeah, I do believe that all police officers should be from Yonkers.
On the first year. After the first year, so Gail was wrong. She mentioned 5, so it's actually 1 year. Correct. After you hired, you must be a resident of Yonkers for the first year. Afterwards, you can move to whatever place you want. Now, correct. Do you think that while you serve the city of Yonkers as a police officer, should you live in Yonkers? I know what it is, but what I'm asking is what you think.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings on it, honestly. I mean, I do feel that police officers should have the right to move wherever they want and people, it's not that they run from the community they police, but, some people want different things that Yonkers doesn't offer. So, some people move because they have special needs kids that certain programs, just unfortunately we don't have in Yonkers, again, because we don't have enough money, just to touch on that topic, So I think that people should have the right to move wherever they want within reason, obviously. But I've lived in Yonkers my whole life. I've never left. In fact, only a few years ago, I moved to Southwest Yonkers. I'm here. I'm in the heart of it, and I love it.
Personally, I don't oppose, but people have different opinions. Now, this question goes to both of you. Was a question also posed by one of our viewers. What about, is it time to have a black commissioner, one of the 3 deputy chiefs representing the community? Because look, we hear the mayor constantly saying that this is a highly diverse and inclusive city. But when we look at those on top, the decision makers, they don't represent the diversity and inclusive city of Yonkers. Is it time, Kit, to get a black commissioner?
I think the commissioner we have right now is the right commissioner for the right time, and I think he's doing a great job.
No, I'm not saying we should change. I'm not asking for a suggestion if we should change the commissioner.
Fire him? Is that what we're saying?
No. I'm not saying, let's say a commissioner comes to an end, he leaves or whatever. I'm asking in general terms, not to display any discontent for whoever is there now. That's all I'm saying.
It'd be great to have a police commissioner of color. But what I will say for sure is that, we need to do a better job at trying to attain better diversity. Our numbers do not reflect the community. I met with Detective Sergeant Charlie Walker earlier. We had a phenomenal, I hope Charlie agrees, phenomenal 2.5-hour conversation. And that was one of the topics we talked about a lot. And I want to say this, and now that it's in public, and I told him that I would, I, in my position, am fully committed to trying to make that happen. Right now, I think we have less than 40 police officers of color, less than 40 black police officers. It does not reflect the community, and I think we need to do more to achieve that. And to that end, some of the programs that we do, I think that's one of the greatest things about them. I think they serve as a great recruiting tool. This past model that we've had where 6 months before a test, we pick a handful of police officers of color and throw them out there and try and recruit people. It's never worked, and it's not going to work. We need to bridge that gap of getting to kids when they're 14 and 15, showing them that, hey, they can get this job and here's how to do it, but just really breaking down that stigma of what it's like to be a police officer, and I think that's important to make that happen, and I'm committed to it.
And I think lots of people don't know, and again, because of the lack probably of promoting or letting the community know, there is many things that you guys are doing that in one way or the other, it's a recruitment tool. The Explorer program, kids that at very young age, at that age that you really can show them, and those kids might turn out to be police officers. Kit, maybe you want to tell us why we don't have many black police officers. It's because of the lack of applying. It's because of the lack of not showing interest. It's because they see the police as the enemy. Let's use a few minutes to change perspective, because like I have heard many times, if you want to change the system, you need to be part of the system. So we cannot have a lieutenant black officer or captain or deputy chief unless we get black and minorities within the police department and then work through the ranks. A few words just to educate and inform the people in regards to that.
So if I'm not mistaken, I think our biggest problem is and has been the fact that we cannot get enough black officers black people to come out and take the test. It's not that when they take the test they don't score well. That's not the case. It is we literally just aren't doing a good enough job getting them to the table, getting them to take the test. So that's our hurdle. And again, I think trying to grab somebody 6 months before the test at the library or at a job fair and say, hey, take the test. It hasn't worked, and we can't expect it to work. So we definitely need to recruit from a younger age and break that stigma early. And I say this often to the Yonkers Force kids that we deal with and to the kids in the BRIC program that we deal with. My dream is to one day be at a ceremony where one of those kids is up on that stage having his shield pinned on them, his or her shield pinned on them. I know it's going to happen. I look forward to that day, and I'll just be incredibly proud. But one of the things that Charlie said to me today, and I really I couldn't agree more, is that what we need to do really is to reach out to these younger kids, the kids that we saw protesting. There was such a great, young, vibrant crowd. That's our target environment, I think, for this, that we need to really reach out to. We need to ask them, why aren't you taking the test, or why would you not consider being a police officer? Tell us what we can do to fix that. And I think that's one of the really important things that we need to do.
Mike, you have anything to say on this subject?
Thank you, Ben. I feel, and this is not unique just to the Yonkers PD. I think it's citywide, particularly on the municipal side, that our city workforce is not reflective of our city population. So that, what we see right here with police, I think it's particularly with all the departments. I don't have the exact numbers. I could get them. I remember last year, a year and a half ago, I requested the information of our diversity of our workforce, and we're just not there yet. And how do we get there? I think that there has to be rolling up the sleeves and incentivize, inform, and educate our residents on getting. And then, you hear two different sides of the story. You hear, oh, I tried applying, I scored, whatever zone they're in, and I never got a call. Then you hear the other side, oh, well, they took tests and they're in zone, 100, where they're not even, agreeable. There's a problem in our workforce. There's clear lack of diversity. And what we have to do, again, working key stakeholders, faith-based, community-based, union-based, legislative-based, and make it happen. Some people are not going to like it. Many people will. When we tackle these hard topics, these difficult conversations, talking about, implicit bias, systemic racism, lack of opportunity, it makes many people uncomfortable. But as leaders, be it a PBA leader, city council president, the leader, we have to have these conversations. It's incumbent upon us to have these conversations. So that being said, there's no debate. Our workforce lacks diversity. It lacks bosses and leaders with diversity. How can we all come together to make it happen? It's going to be many steps, but there has to be a commitment from the executive branch, which is the mayor. There has to be a commitment from our labor forces. There has to be a commitment from our legislative arm. And there has to be a commitment from the community. Come in, apply, take tests. And I have no problem trying to give incentives for Yonkers residents, trying to give incentives to graduates of Yonkers High School. Obviously, there's always these civil service requirements and things along those lines. I think Keith was spot on. You can't prohibit somebody from where they live. Many people, I have friends that left Yonkers because of our school system, or, they left because of sports or whatever it is. So, Ben, these are great questions. And if there's a true commitment, not lip service, we can make it happen. Yonkers is a big ship. We can't stop on a dime and change course. We have to plant the seed now for the youth, for the future. You have my, and I know Councilwoman Shanae Williams has been talking about diversity and the lack thereof in city government.
Now, Keith, every year there is a YPD survey. I call it the How Am I Doing survey. Just to gauge satisfaction among residents about the police department. Are they happy? They're not happy. That will help also make improvements. And I see the grades, and I see the grades are awesome. But now the question is, who is filling up those surveys? Which geographic location? Which zip code? Because I talk to tons of people, Caucasians, black, yellows, blues, every kind of skin color. And I see that a large majority of Caucasians, they're satisfied with the police department. There is always a minority, a small number that are not, but the majority are. But if we talk with the people on the southwest of Yonkers, minorities, lots of them are not satisfied. And I asked them, did you do the survey to express in order to help them, improve? What for? Why you think that it is that mostly whites understand and support police and a large number of blacks do not? Is there any kind of a racial profiling in Yonkers? Does the police department handles minorities and blacks the same way as they do whites? Again, I'm not implying anything. I'm just asking a general question that comes through the feed or through a text or email. That's all I'm doing.
So in terms of the survey, we all know that these surveys are limited. It's, obviously based on who they reach and who fills it out. So yeah, there are certainly limitations, and but we do know that 74% of the African American people that filled the survey out feel that the YPD is treating them fairly. So now the question becomes, did the people in Southwest Yonkers fill it out? And you're right, like the zip code probably, there's a lot of meat in that data. So we have to kind of delve into that a little bit. As to why people aren't filling the survey out, I think it goes to what Mike said earlier. Like, there are people out there who feel disenfranchised. It goes to voting. It goes to filling out surveys like this. It goes towards a lot of things. And that's more a part of, systemic problems, in the entire country that we deal with, in the entire system, more than just, within the police department. So, as far as them filling that out, I think that's one of the reasons why it may not be getting filled out as much in some of those areas. But honestly, I feel it's more of a socioeconomic problem. I think when people are disenfranchised, it's a bit more of a socioeconomic problem than it is strictly a race issue. I think there's a lot of data that shows that, but that's my belief. But I do think if we're going to have these surveys, then we should really, really make a much more concerted effort to try and reach every corner of the city.
Now, Donnell, Laurie, they saying that they've been living in Yonkers for many, many years. They have not seen a survey. I guess you are hiding in a place that you don't see sunlight, because in police defense, I've seen those surveys every year. I post them, they post them. It's all over social media. There is a links. So if you haven't seen it, does not necessarily mean that it has not been out there. It has been.
Here, Ben, I'm glad you said that, and I think you're 100% right. And here's the problem with social media, or one of many problems with social media. And we're on it. We're both on it a lot. We utilize it. I think it could be really a great tool to reach people. But we see what we see because that's what we want to see. The algorithm of Facebook and of social media is such that it will only feed you what it feels it knows that you want to see. So if you're in, and I don't like to use the term sides, but like if you're in that groove of, here's here are my friends and here's what Facebook wants me to see, you just may never see the survey. You could be on Facebook all day long and be in Yonkers, and we know this to be true. People could live next door to each other in Yonkers in the same exact community and be on Facebook and have the equal amount of friends, all from Yonkers, and get two completely different feeds on Facebook because there's just a huge problem with the way social media is. So how do we conquer that? That's a good question. And I think Yonkers Voice is probably one of those few formats out there that bridges kind of both sides. That's one of the reasons why I go on your show. It's because I think it reaches the East Yonkers side, and I also think it reaches the Southwest Yonkers side. And again, I don't like to use the term sides because it has bad connotation, but I think you know what I mean. We have to, it's like the news. If you watch CNN, you watch one version of how the world's going, and if you watch Fox, you see a different version of the world. And if you continue to only watch one, you have a completely different view of how this world is and what's happening. And that's really like a huge societal problem. I really think that is. This era of 24-hour media and social media, it's something that we all have to tackle, I think.
Keith, I agree with you because I'm very often blamed, you only put out bad things. And I tell them, no, I put out everything. I go to schools, I go to the police department, I go to parades. It's not my fault if the algorithms of Facebook only pushes a certain content. Okay, it's not under my control. But I can say that the stuff about the police survey has been out there. I've seen it. I published it. and I've seen it in many places. Mike, would you want to say anything? You seem like thinking, deep thought, you know, so.
No, Keith was spot on. It opened, what he's really talking about is privacy and the metrics for digital advertisement. I think everyone, including us three or listening, you go to Google, you search for a pair of sneakers, you search a vacation, you search anything, and within a matter of minutes, you'll see something you're searching going on. And, it goes back, I think of 2016, the presidential election, about data mining and showing people what they really want to hear. Social media is really a business. And, people say, how does all the major platforms make money? Be it Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, it's all marketers and advertising. So, is there is there really a right to privacy when we waive our right and where we're searching?
Yeah.
So I think that's what I was thinking when Keith was going.
Yeah.
A lot of open source information being out there, and I think as Americans we're giving up that right unknowingly.
Okay, Donnell, Keith McCall, I can hear what you just said. City Councilwoman just said she never seen one, before her two eyes. Well, I don't know who said that. I wasn't reading it, but I can tell you those surveys were put out. The fact that you didn't see it does not mean it did not go out. They were out there. I published them myself. Keith, we have to, sooner or later, we have to conclude this. We could stay here the entire day back and forth. I actually like it, but we have to conclude it. So in closure, is that something that you would like to say to the community that will inform, educate, and help bridge that connection between community and police officers?
So just in terms of what's happened over the last couple of weeks, in the murder of George Floyd and everything we've seen after, a couple things. So number one, to the protesters out there, thank you for having the interest in doing that and showing such enthusiasm. And again, I was really excited by the age group that was out there, and that is our future. So to them, kudos for being out there and showing that you care about your community, and thank you for keeping the temperature as low as it was. I think we were really successful, and a lot of that had to do with the protesters. And a promise to them is that, I will do my best to listen, and I will make sure those around me do their best to listen and include them in everything that we do moving forward. And to the cops that patrolled and worked during those protests, I could not be more proud of them. It was not an easy job. And we say they were peaceful protests, but the truth is there was a lot of nasty things said right in their faces. And they showed tremendous patience, and I love them, for their resolve and for their patience. So kudos to them as well.
No doubt.
Just moving forward, I think, first and foremost, we really have to do a better job of listening. But just very specifically, if I could nail this down as far as Yonkers goes, because this is the Yonkers Voice, Yonkers has to remember that they're legislating for Yonkers, and we have to look at what Yonkers residents really want, not what the national media is saying. We have to look at what Yonkers really needs, and that, whether we like it or not, falls into the category of what Yonkers can really afford, and we have to truly prioritize when we do that. So I'm hopeful that we will do that.
Mike.
Thank you, Ben. Keith, you are absolutely correct. The restraint, I've heard some of the nastiness that were directed at a lot of your members and the resolve, but also who deserves credit is I actually seen Ben, many people in Yonkers and around Westchester who saw the protests go to Sawmill saw it from your Yonkers Voice, and you were very valuable in assisting and help de-escalating the situation on the Sawmill. And Keith, I think it was Lieutenant Dean who was in a very uncomfortable situation, and he was cool, calm, collected, didn't fall for the bait, and he should be commended, and as long as all other members. That being said, this is the start of the dialogue. The takeaways that I got out of this, Keith, is, you're not saying hard no. What I'm hearing is you want to be part of the process. You would like to have the input, and that's a commitment. Again, and this is not to remind us, as the leader of this council, that's a commitment I give you. You will be part of the process. Your input matters, because if you want this to be effective, the members need to understand why it's being done. This is not a punishment. This is trying to change a culture. It's bigger than any one person. You know what? I'm not going to be the city council president forever. Keith, you're doing a phenomenal job as PBA president. You yourself are not going to be there. This council is not going to be there forever. But 2020 is a defining moment in our country's history. And we want to know, were we watching on CNN and saying, wow, or were we active participants in changing this culture? So as I said earlier, when we spoke, and I say now, you will be that part of that process. I would like you to be a part of that process. I'm sure there's going to be things that you can't support, and I would like to focus on what you can support. Dollars and cents, always appreciate that. Everything costs money, but that's secondary to me now. The council, I believe we have the support. I've spoken to Councilwoman Williams, who I believe she's following. Councilwoman Diaz, I've spoken to. And just yesterday, the majority leader, Pineda Isaac, sent out a press release pretty much reiterating what I was saying on Friday. So, the votes are there. So that's not the issue. Is there support? It's we want to do it the right way. And it's the start of the process. I'll be reaching out to you with law department, and let's this was useful, and let's continue that progress. Ben, always thank you for inviting me. Keith, we'll continue that dialogue, going forward.
Okay, before you guys go, I want to thank, a big thank to all the audience, but I also want to take this opportunity to clarify something on that Sawmill Parkway event the other day. Somebody just came to me and told me, you have to take sides. Are you with us or are you with them? Well, my job is not to take sides. My job is just to inform you. I inform you, I'll let you know what's happening. You take sides. You use your own rationale and formulate your own opinion. I am not against you, not in your favor. I am for everyone. I am for the community, and I'm here to support you and to let you know what goes on. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Mike. And until next time.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe. See each other. Bye-bye now.
Take care.
Bye-bye.